If you're on LinkedIn, please let me know you're on LinkedIn. Because it's so far telling me that it's waiting for broadcast. So I think it has something to do with us changing the date. Natalie Coulson is live right now. Well, that is a bit of that is a good start. Yes, we are on. Okay.
Already.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. It's a little bit delayed on LinkedIn, but anyway, we might start again. I'm sorry if this is a bit repetitive if you have seen the beginning, but we are going to start again. We'll be even better this time, Ellie. So I'll just recap just in a little bit of background. So I was running a personal branding program. It's called Personal Branding with Confidence. I'll go back a step. My name's Natalie Coulson. I run a company called Amped Up Marketing and Communications. So my real passion is personal branding and also content marketing. So I ran a program back in September. Back in May. The next one's coming up in September, back in May and June, and all about personal branding. So I was working with executives, consultants, entrepreneurs to help them to understand what personal branding is, understand what brand is, really work to identify their goals. So what they were wanting to achieve with their business, but taking that back to them as a person and looking at values and mission, vision, all from the perspective of being of an individual. But what ended up coming up in that conversation was the need for a bit more clarity around design, and then how do you differentiate between your colors or your personality as an individual with your business brand. It might not be much of a difference if you are a freelancer, but if you're an entrepreneur or if you're someone with team members or you have aspirations for that, there's going to be a difference. So I am not a designer. So I have invited Ellie Nass, who is a designer. So she is a design director who's worked throughout Australia, Asia, and the UK. I'm even quicker this time, Ellie. She's worked with global brands such as Ernst & Young, Johnny Walker, Deloitte, and Medibank Private. And she's also a lecturer in design at UTS in Sydney. So you've done quite a few things, Ellie. So thank you for making the time today. I know you're super busy, but I just wanted to add to the conversation to talk about design and how the hell you come up with things like logos, fonts, and colors, because it's not about just sitting down and going, oh yeah, I like that color, and to actually create a brand that's going to have impact. It can't just be, it's not as simple as that. So I'm just going to jump onto LinkedIn. Yes, we have some people here. Excellent. So again, apologies if this is doubling up wherever you're watching this, but we finally got the technology working. So Ellie, welcome.
Thank you, Natalie. Very exciting to be here, and this is round 2. So
I know. So yeah, I just could see it wasn't broadcasting on LinkedIn, and I kind of had a moment of panic, and I thought, massive imperfect action. We'll just kick it off and do a redo. So this is what we do. And this is how we show our versatility and our resilience and all these wonderful things. So, but yeah, I'm just interested because I know you work with really large brands. But when we've been talking, the same process applies for a small brand or an individual. So what I'm really interested to know is how you, like when you start working with a client, and I know there is a difference between whether it's an individual, like a tiny brand, or whether it's a massive brand. How do you start that process?
Saying earlier that I think starting the process is actually, like, trying to work out the scale of the business is actually really important, because I think it'll determine the process that you take. And I think the reason for that, if you're working with an organization that has more than one person, you're trying to get unity around these really core principles for your brand. So the process, you're often navigating a lot of politics. So it's actually really important to get the process right. So kind of having workshops or making sure that the key people are involved in the conversation. But the conversation is really, I would say, even though I don't work in personal branding, I imagine it's extremely similar. And I like to really simplify it. And for me, it's really about understanding what drives you, like the purpose of what your business or your brand is, and what your values and beliefs are, and what your personality is. Like, they're kind of the three things that I really tend to focus on. And it's often just a series of conversations. And I really enjoy it. I think I studied psychology. I was always going to be a psychologist before I kind of got into design. And I think it's because the reason I love it, I think, is because you really get under the skin of people, and it's a really reflective process. And I think regardless of whether you work in an organization or it's your business, taking that time to really reflect on, what motivates you, why you get up in the morning, why you've established this brand or business, what are your driving values, what are you driving, what are the behaviors or beliefs that you have, and how do you want to be perceived is, I think people just really find it quite a therapeutic process.
But definitely, and a lot of that is discovery. Like, you don't always know all the answers to those things.
Yeah.
When you start out, you might, but you don't articulate them maybe to yourself. It takes time to bring them out.
Yeah, and I think that process of defining the strategy is it's about really distilling it. And I like the kind of using this metaphor of kind of distilling down the key ingredients of the persona, whether it's a business or whether it's your personality, being able to distill that into this little strategic framework that means you can kind of bring it to life, kind of visually or through an experience or how you interact or what you say.
It does take time. And that's one thing that, because the program that I teach is across 8 weeks, or 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
And one of the comments was, I really need to take time out to think about this stuff. And again, apologies if I'm doubling up and you heard this before, but when someone asks me, like, what's your mission and your vision? And it's like, when I first started out, I got my ABN and I thought, God, I have no idea. Like, it's so hard to answer those questions at first. But once you come up, I kind of panicked and I thought, well, I don't know what those things are. Mustn't be a serious business person. And so then I realized it takes time to uncover those things, and that's okay.
Well, I have to laugh at myself.
You're going to disagree with me?
No. I was just going to say, the funny thing is that, so I stopped being an employee a year ago to start my own thing, and I work in branding, so I should be all across this. But a year in, I've been thinking the whole year, like, how am I going to brand myself?
Yes.
And I still haven't landed on it because it is and I haven't taken myself through the process I should do with my clients. But
that's what we don't, do we?
Yeah. So, and I just don't have the time to do it properly. I was just like, I want to have that time.
You can empathize.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes. Yeah, and you're a brand person. So, yeah, and it's often like that, isn't it? So on this note, so where do you think businesses, I think for the purpose of this conversation, we're pretty much talking about, okay, it might be a business with 5 staff members, maybe, because I have a bunch of like freelancers and contractors that I work with. It's never just me, and there's a VA and there's a coordinator. So there are people, but really I'm the core business person. So that's really the kind of person I'm talking to with this conversation. So with a solo person, so where are they getting stuck in the rebrand process, do you think?
I imagine a lot of people probably don't see themselves as creative. And so how can I possibly think about this whole process? And I don't even know what's involved. And I think probably coming at it from the side of personal preference, like choosing, your visual identity based on personal preference. And I think you probably just got to switch your mindset and be thinking about, what do you want to, like, once you get clarity on that brand strategy, what do you want to communicate and bring to life?
Okay, say they just want to get business cards, they just want to get started. Is there, like, I think that's where I see a lot of business owners jumping the gun too quickly and just picking a logo, picking some colors, going straight to Canva and just picking one of the logos. Like, what's wrong with that?
I love Canva because I think it's very democratic and it means that people can communicate clearly. But I think your brand, you've got to invest in your brand. And I think that's such a key thing that you've got to take the time to really think about what you're communicating with those elements. So as we said before, time is a critical thing. So take that time to really think about how you want to present your brand to the world and make really considered decisions about that. I mean,
why is that important? I know some of the answers to this from my perspective, but
it's very hard to rebrand. Well, you often see startups that have started on a very low budget and they get down the track where they've matured and then they'll go through a big rebrand when they got the right budget to do it properly. And so I don't actually think there's anything wrong with kind of doing that. But it's hard. It's hard to kind of rebrand and create a new kind of change your identity once you've established it. It's a lot of work to just establish it in the first place. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question there, Natalie.
No, I just know when I started, like I got my ABN and I thought I've got to go get clients. And so I was literally working for free for somebody. And then I thought, well, I need to get some clients that pay me money. So I started going to networking events. I'd been so used to being in the sales, the magazine industry, and I was just used to presenting opportunities. And so it was natural to go to. And so at that time, this is 2016, I went to Vistaprint and I printed off I got a business card with my name on it and one of their like bog standard logos. So it did not represent me at all. And so like that was certainly the opposite of what you're saying. Yes, I did get a few clients, but then I kind of hit a roadblock, which was, okay, well, this doesn't say anything about me whatsoever. And so I did have to invest in at least proper logo, but I probably didn't do all the pre-work because I've learnt. So I think that the importance here is education. So educating, so using your knowledge to explain at least some of the fundamentals around brand. So if someone doesn't go straight to Canva or doesn't go straight to Vistaprint, and I don't even know if Canva existed in the actual way it does now, back in 2016. So yeah, like what is a better approach given that they haven't got $20,000 to invest in a brand?
I would definitely work with a designer. I would stretch your budget to work with a designer. They are skilled and experienced in kind of that active translating strategy into a visual identity.
Yeah.
I think that is a real.
So it's really getting the strategy right first, though.
It's 100% strategy. Like there's absolutely no point jumping to. And actually, that is a challenge. Like I get people coming to me saying, you know, I love blue, or I've had this logo because it's, I've had it since I started. But it's actually making sure that whatever is in your toolkit is communicating something that's relevant to your brand and how you want to be perceived and seen.
Yes.
So being a lot more, strategic in your visual identity.
Because I've certainly seen that if you don't have a brand that communicates who you are and what you're wanting to achieve, you attract random things.
Yep.
You attract things that aren't really aligned with you, which causes a whole lot of pain.
100%. And I think that's why the process does take time, and also it's sometimes exploring different visual identities and knowing that's not right. That's actually not communicating what I want to communicate. But something that might feel right, and that's going to get the right audience.
So what I will share, because we're kind of getting to this part of the conversation, is that Ellie and I are actually hosting a workshop on the 20th of September, so that anyone who is in this category of an entrepreneur, I'd say coach, consultant, freelancer, and you either want to rebrand or you want to actually move on from your Canva logo, or you just want to understand brand from a strategic perspective, we'll drop the link into the chat in LinkedIn, and I'll share it to the other platforms as well, so that you can book in for that. So it's only a group of 6 because we want to make it really interactive. And I can tell by the look on Ellie's face that it's like she's so keen to help people get the strategy right, because it's like frustrating, right?
Yeah.
To see people cutting out the most important part.
Yeah.
And I just don't think many people going into business for themselves just understand how much how important that strategy is, because it dictates then everything. It dictates, I know from a comms perspective or a content perspective, it dictates your key messages. So it dictates the main bits of information that you want to communicate to help your clients achieve a certain goal.
Yep. I can see a question there. What about if you just want to tweak or enhance your brand? I'm not quite sure. Is that whether the workshop is relevant?
Yeah. So if you want to tweak it, so I think that it's looking at how you want to tweak it. So I think that all goes back to strategy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also, if you already have an existing brand, critiquing it through the right lens. And again, that strategic framework will give you the lens to make really considered decisions about what's working, what isn't.
Yes. So have you seen that comment on LinkedIn?
I'm seeing it in Restream.
I'm sorry if I'm missing some questions. I don't see the questions in here. So anyway, yes, please mention it if you see it, Ellie. Yeah, I'm just looking at LinkedIn. So, okay, back to my questions. How do you feel? What do you think is the difference between, so say someone is a solo business owner, what is the difference between their personal brand and their business brand in the terms of expressing it visually?
Interesting question because, as I said a little while ago, I kind of left being an employee to start my own thing. And one of the things I've been thinking about and haven't landed on is, do I want to go to market as a personal brand, Ellie Nuss, or do I set up a business brand where I'm kind of more spokesperson for that business brand? And I still haven't landed on that. I think it's a lot harder to establish a business brand because you don't have that kind of personal connection. And I think personal connection is the most important, one of the most powerful assets of a brand that you can leverage. But I think the process is very much the same. Just remind me of the question again, sorry, Natalie.
Oh, so what are the main differences visually between your personal and business brand?
I would say there's probably a lot more of an emphasis on the visual identity when you're talking about a business brand as opposed to a personal brand. And I think that's because I see the personal brand probably relying a lot more on PR and the person, what they're saying and how they're saying.
Boosting your profile.
Yeah, whereas I think business brands, that's also really critical, but you also have to do a lot more work to develop a visual identity. So there's, I think, a lot more investment in how does this thing look and feel when you interact with it. I don't think there's necessarily any distinct difference to how the visual identity works, other than that you're expressing the brand strategy of the business as opposed to your personal.
Yes, yeah, well, that is the difference, isn't it? And I suppose it depends on your vision. Yes. So, and I think it's tricky too when your business changes. And so I'm really looking forward to the workshop for that reason. I want to sit down there and work on mine, because when I started up Amped Up Marketing, I was going to work. I wanted to get an office and have staff and do content marketing and build brands. And I've just changed my whole approach. So I do still do that work. But you don't need to be, COVID taught us that you certainly don't need to be in an office. And then I realized how much I enjoy this sort of work around personal brand.
That's an interesting point, actually, just because I've been thinking about, do I do the whole personal branding approach or do I go down the business branding approach? And I actually think one of the benefits of a personal brand is that there's just a bit more lenience around being able to pivot and change and grow as you.
Because you're you.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder to do that as a business brand because you put a lot of work into establishing to be known within a certain space And if you have a new service offering or product, or you're trying to do something new, that's a lot harder to do. Whereas I think when you build that personal brand, you can explore, and people will follow you if they kind of have that connection.
Yeah, and I know even being in magazines, it would take about 3 months to change. I think obviously the bigger the brand, the longer it would take. But about as an individual, about 3 months until people, if you change your offering, until that picks up pace and people start describing you with that difference. Some people still hang on to what you did 2-3 years ago. But anyone who's actively kind of traveling that path with you, I feel like it takes about 3 months. But you can feel free to disagree.
No, I totally.
Because I think if you're talking about the likes of some of your larger clients, it would certainly a rebrand. I mean, how long would you take to do a rebrand for a large client?
So probably the biggest rebrand I've worked on with a global rebrand for Ernst & Young. And I was involved for 18 months. So that was huge. And you can imagine, like, all the politics and challenges of dealing with that is an incredibly time-consuming process. But even more recently, working with a company of about 30 people was a good 6-month process. It's an it's a big investment. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. But so there's so much more flexibility with the personal brand. But it is important to look, not everybody sets up a separate business brand. I think that's worth mentioning.
I kind of, I think I've actually landed on probably going down the hybrid track where it's kind of, I want to, for the risk factor, I actually want to have a separate business brand because I can kind of disconnect from that, or or if it's all successful, I can sell it.
Yes.
I think that's a huge thing to consider. Like, what do you actually want to do with that business? But I think anyone should be investing in their personal brand. That's going to follow you for life. That's worth investing in. And I don't know, 5 years, I wouldn't surprise me if I was doing something completely different.
Yeah.
So I think investing in yourself is worth doing. But I think they feed off one another as well. So, all the big wigs like Elon Musk and Tesla and Richard Branson and Virgin, like, they're two brands.
They're two separate things.
Yes. Two separate things, but they completely support one another.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's also how you feel about, I don't know, I felt a bit strange about having clients with just my name. I mean, my first business was just Natalie Hiller Communications, but then I changed my last name, and then I thought, well, I can't keep that business name. And then it was an opportunity to think, well, okay, maybe I create a separate entity. And so it's quite ironic that it's come all back to the personal brand focus. So yeah, you just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. But yeah, you say it's worth having the two. So okay, so what are we going to do then? Well, how are you going to structure this workshop? And that's probably a really big question. But for 2 hours, and you don't have to have all the answers yet, but it'll be really interactive. So the up to 6 people that are there will have an opportunity to go through what their current brand is, if they have one. And then, I'll let you answer the question.
So there'll be a bit of pre-work where I want anyone that's going to be involved to have done a little bit of research into their competitors, their market, their industry, so they're really clear on the context that they're building their brand in. I'll then guide people through a really simple framework that I use to establish your strategy. And this is obviously in 2 hours, I'm just kind of guiding people through it. And then we're going to really focus in on the brand personality, which for me is probably a really important part for when it starts to get a bit more tangible, because defining your personality really helps you to work out some criteria for the look and feel.
Yes.
So we'll really kind of focus in on that. I think that's largely what I'm planning to cover in that session.
And so then what will they get at the end of that? So obviously the first 3 people that book in, we've already had 2 book ins. There's only one more that can book in with this. So one more person to book in will get the consultation with you afterwards, right?
Yeah, so just for the first 3 people that book in, I'll do a follow-up one-on-one, 45 minutes to kind of go through the strategy that you developed or anything that you might have developed following the workshop to give you feedback and thoughts to considerations. And ultimately, I think from doing the workshop, hopefully it'll just build a little bit of confidence in how someone goes about the basic process and walks them through also the design process. Because I imagine a lot of solo operators don't know what's actually involved and what they need. And you're ultimately trying to create a brand toolkit that you can use and establish.
That's
and
right.
I'll walk you through that. So what's involved, if you are working with a designer, how to work well with a designer.
Yes, that's really important.
So that you feel confident in that process. I think a lot of clients struggle also to brief people. Like if you are working, whether it's a copywriter, a photographer, a designer, you need to be able to brief people really well, which is why that strategic framework is so important. So hopefully if you'll...
I know in my copywriting work, that's so key. Like if somebody has a brand messaging document, I'm like, yes, because you just, because it's just the Bible. So, I showed you my scroll off my whiteboard, which I will not share right now, but it starts off brand as the Bible and then goes down to who you're talking to. And then you have your service offering. And then, of course, it depends on how you run the business, but there'll be offers and marketing and sales and publicity, but it all comes from the brand.
Yeah. It's like
it's like the head.
Yeah.
and the heart.
I just see it as it's like your guidebook. Like it's your guiding principles. I kind of see it as a set of guiding principles, basically. Everything that you do should be governed by those principles.
And so how do you go about finding the right person to do your branding?
That's
you just need to, I suppose it's that's going to be different for every person.
Yeah, I think finding someone that you trust and gets you and takes the time is the right person.
And understands your industry.
Yeah.
An appreciation of your industry. Yeah. Very cool. Well, I did drop the link and I do see everyone's comments. It just took me a while to get the technology working again. My gosh. So yes, there's, if you check out that landing page, there is some more information in there about the workshop. Does anyone have any more questions for Ellie? Because we can answer, but if not, if you're watching the replay, is there anything else that you want to share, Ellie, about either differentiating between personal and business brand or the workshop?
No, other than that, I think if you do want to come along to the workshop, it's really a bit of a Kickstarter. So in 2 hours, we're definitely not going to be covering. You're not going to land with your brand defined, but it'll
give you all the pillars to think about, right?
Yeah, and it should also just be a really enjoyable experience, I would hope.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, Ellie.
And
the next personal branding with confidence program will start September 30. So that's something I'm promoting as well. I'm still working on my fancy landing page for that. So, check out the landing page in the comments for the workshop. It's called Amplify Your Brand. That's not really, but anyway, that's the landing page. We do what we can. So anyway, thank you so much, Ellie.
A total pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you guys in the workshop.